If the CEO wants you to make an omelette and doesn't want you to break eggs, you're setting yourself up for failure. So if the CEO does not go out and actively support, won't get much done. We often join HR because we like people and want people to be happy. That is not always helpful when you arrive in the C-suite.
HR often gets blamed for the culture CEO has created. Welcome to the HR Masterclass, the podcast where we explore leadership, culture, and talent. This episode will be broadcasted in English as we have an international guest. I'm Frederick Nolf, and in this podcast, I hand the microphone to leaders who have something meaningful to say. We talk about experience, convictions, and how they make things move. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Hein Knaapen, who is managing partner of CEO.works in Europe. CEO.works is a boutique advisory firm that works with CEO to focus their strategy on the few value hotspots where 70 to 80% of value creation actually sits, bringing investment decision rigor to talent decisions. Hein is probably one of the top 25 HR thought leaders in the world and among the top 5 in Europe. With 41 years in the field, including 20 years at Unilever and CHRO roles at KPN and ING Bank, where he led HR for up to 60,000 people, he has built a rare combination of operational depth and strategic sharpness. What particularly stands out is his intellectual honesty and his refusal to romanticize HR. He consistently challenges the profession to drop what doesn't serve performance and to focus with surgical precision on what does. In this conversation, we will talk about talent to value, the illusion of culture change programs, the courage to be disliked, why empowering people sometimes means delegating your own disagreements, and many more topics. This podcast is produced with the support of our partners, TrendSearch and Q7 Leader. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and share it with others around you.
I'm Hein Knaapen. I am the managing partner of CEO.works in Europe.
What has been your professional journey before that role?
Yeah, by now, Frederick, I've been in HR for 41 years. And of those 41 years, I was 35 years in big corporates. The first 20 years I spent in various HR roles within Unilever. And then I became a chief HR officer at KPN, the Dutch, at the time, regional telephone company. And afterwards, I moved on to ING Bank as their chief HR officer. I left them in end of 2019 to join a boutique called CEO.works, a boutique founded by the person I had worked for back during my days at Unilever. A most interesting man, Sandy Ork.
Yeah, very well known in the HR.
Yeah. He is a never-ending fountain of new, useful ideas about how to run people decisions and how to run companies. And I've been responsible for CEO.works in Europe since that time. So I'm now in year 7 of my work with CEOs and people leads to accelerate value creation by reducing the number of people decisions they need.
And how large were your roles with KPN and with ING in terms of number of people covered?
Yeah, so at KPN, we were 25,000 people. At ING, we were 60,000 people.
60,000 people. It's a very large company across different countries, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you look back at your career, would you say that has been some points that really were decisive in who you became?
Yeah. I think, Frederick, leaving Unilever was a major decision. And I suffered from exactly the same thing that very many people suffer from when they're in big companies. You become a little dependent, Frederick, and you fool yourself by saying that you're there because you love the company so much and you're loyal and all of that. I'm not saying that is untrue, but it is a bit of fooling yourself. So it took me some courage to decide to leave Unilever, and it was a very good decision. And then the second point was leaving KPN, and the third one was leaving ING. And every time I decided to leave a company, in hindsight, my mental independence grew. So I would say those are those in hindsight, those were existential decisions.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting for our listeners to understand. Okay, what was the mental process to come to such a big decision?
I was in my last job in Unilever, was HR director of the Netherlands. The Netherlands being one of the two parent countries of Unilever at the time. And what I saw was my growth curve in terms of jobs being offered to me was flattening. I was not seen as a person who would make it to a more senior HR role, and so that made me start looking around. And of course, I was all a little bit anxious, but it became very clear to me that if I wanted to grow further and become more senior, I had to leave Unilever. And that was essentially the thinking behind my departure from Unilever, joining KPN.
So leaving a very comfortable, probably, position. Did it take courage?
You might also say, Frederic, it took a certain naivety. As what I've learned afterwards, risk and reward travel together. And there was an element of taking risk. And I probably slightly underestimated the changes this would make to my life. But in hindsight, I do not regret any of the decision I took regarding my career.
Oh, great. That reminds me a quote from Mark Twain, the American author, which says, "They didn't know it was impossible, so they did it."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great. What have been your sources of inspiration?
I would say, Frederic, if we would use the old scale of introversion to extroversion, I am I'm at the extreme end of extroversion. So I create energy from conversations, and so I like to joke here at home. The best way um, to make me lose all my impact is to sit me in an office without anyone else. So the first thing is I talk a lot to people. I talk a lot to people. That's how you and I got to know each other, and I enjoy our conversations because there's something new that you bring me. I like that. The second thing is I I read a lot, and so I'm not only talking magazines like The Economist and Financial Times and Harvard Business Review that I find of excellent quality, but I'm a reader of books, Philippe, because I what I experience is reading a good book, non-fiction, makes you arrive at deeper depths of thinking than only an article. So I read a lot, history, sociology, management, but I think I'm an insatiable reader of nonfiction.
Okay, okay. Well, I join you on two elements. I'm also very extroverted, probably in the similar zone as you are. Although I've more recently discovered the joy of being alone from time to time and taking time being with myself. And another person who is like that is my wife. So when the two of us are together, some people ask us, when you drive car together, do you listen to me? And I say, no, we talk. So we could drive 1,000 kilometers and we talk.
Ah,
And,
ah, ah, ah,
and
ah,
the same
ah.
at home.
That's a joy,
Mm.
Frederic. That's a
And,
joy.
and and the second thing is the reading, but I'm too optimistic about my capacity to read, and so I buy more books than I can read, and so I have a pile of book, but it creates something for me, like it's there, it's available in case I would need to go to that knowledge, and from time to time.
This house is full of books, and when people talk
Yep.
to me about that, then I always tell them, here's the definition of a library. That is the collection of books you would like to read. It's
Ah, yeah, yeah. I love it, and it creates a certain feeling of, okay, it's there. I know it's there. And yeah, I've not read them. Perhaps I won't read them, but at least they are part of my environment.
I'm on the
Straight.
same page. I'm totally on the same page. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
really interesting. With all that great and very senior experience, have you built some convictions? Have you built some beliefs that you believe are no part of how you operate?
Yeah. So we're talking business here.
Sure.
What has become very clear to me, Frederic, is there are in business three non-negotiables, and no more than three. The first would be always abide by laws and regulations and don't compromise. The second is ensure utter dignity of people at work. And the third is company performance. And what I've seen is in our domain, the HR domain, it will hold for other domains as well, but on HR, I can speak with authority. We often get enchanted by new sexy stuff that doesn't solve anything. And we take on great thinking, fooling ourselves in thinking that we need to improve society and what have you. If we only deliver on greater relevance of a company for its customers and for its investors, we will have done a great job. I think that's my operating principle, if I could call it like that, is it's about company performance. Don't fool yourself.
Laser sharp focus on performance.
Yeah.
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 Well, but you said number one. Is this a random order, or would you
Yeah,
say?
that's a good point. I like starting with laws and regulations. Listen, it's that we tend to forget that. I'm not entirely sure about if there's any order, but I noticed that I always start with this list with laws and regulations. Yeah,
And then dignity. So
yeah,
I like to think that it should not be second to performance.
yeah.
Yeah,
Get you,
yeah.
get you. It's an independent principle. I totally agree. Yeah,
And I would hate to say that because of performance, we do things that are against people dignity.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I agree. I agree.
when I asked you the questions on your convictions, you say we're talking business, right? And I said, sure. Well, HR is in business, but it's the human side of business. So are we talking business? Are we talking broader concepts that would apply to life? Is not the case in life as well, that in a way you need to abide by laws, you need to respect human dignity, and then you need to do stuff that are useful, depending on how you define performance in life, but that are useful to your projects.
Well said.
Yeah?
Well
Yeah.
said. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Is there, to the contrary, some HR or business principles that you might have applied in the past or never, but that people seem to take for granted, but that you would challenge?
Yeah. We're not responsible for the happiness of people. That's
Yeah.
for themselves. We're not responsible for people being able to pay their bills. We're there to ensure their dignity, and I totally admit that dignity will need a better definition. It's a little bit broad, but we tend to take on responsibilities that are not for us to take on. Like people are so in the big European corporates, you know this yourself, Frederic. For all kinds of reasons, we take on responsibilities that do sit with people, like turning up at work, doing as you are asked to do, make sure you lead a balanced life, make sure you make a career. If when we become concerned about careers of people in companies, it should be driven by a concern for company performance. So I cannot, if I am on your payroll, I cannot make you responsible for my career, and I cannot make you responsible for my happiness. I find these lines are too blurred, I would say.
Yeah. You know, about happiness, there's a couple of thoughts that I like to share too. Uh, when I look at my own career, It's not true that I've always been happy every moment. There are moments which are not making you happy, but it's part of it and probably part of what makes you grow. You do not only grow out of happiness. Sometimes you need
I
to take the
fully agree. You know this Israeli writer Daniel Ariely, don't you?
no.
Okay, he's the most interesting man. He is
One more book, one more book to collect. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. One the book I read, written a few, is called Predictably Irrational, and he talks about irrationality as a driver of behavior of people. And he once made, and this is to your happiness point, he once made in a session, he said, "Have you ever looked at the New York Marathon?" Yes, yes, yes. And so what did people look like last mile? Well, terrible. They looked terrible. They were suffering. Right. What did they look like once they had arrived at the finish? They were elated. Exactly, he says. That people want to perform, and that doesn't make them happy, but having performed makes them happy. So I like that so much, Frederick. The
You know,
idea of,
I've climbed 4 times the Mont Ventoux on a
yeah,
bicycle. You should not have asked me if I was happy at that moment.
you did that 4 times, the
Yeah.
Mont Ventoux.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
But I won't do that anymore. That's
I
just
get you. And the Mont Ventoux, and this is only a footnote to history. Do you remember that story? I remember that very well. 1967. I was 9 at the time. Tommy Simpson died in the Tour de
sure.
France.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
There's a place there where people would
right.
stop and think, have a
Yes,
thought
exactly.
on
Yeah,
him, and so this is
yeah, exactly.
a memory there, a memorial there. And another thing about making these efforts is that when it brings you to the last percentage of your inner battery, you probably learn something as well. When you are that far in performance, which I'm not advising necessarily in companies, but uh, and the other thing about happiness, I have a tendency to believe that most of the traditional HR thinking is not in balance in the sense that it's not creating adult to adult relationships. When you look to transactional analysis, most of the HR way of thinking tends to perpetuate parent to child relationship, placing managers in the roles of a parent and placing employees in the roles of a child. But our employees are not children, they are grown up adults. They are responsible for their lives, and feeling responsible for someone else's happiness doesn't seem so okay in a world of adults.
I fully agree. I fully agree.
You're
Well said.
responsible for yourself.
Yeah,
This being said, there's something about still can a number of human needs being fulfilled by the fact of working, and can you see people flourish? And I like also to remind to leaders that hey, don't lose sight that people have needs, and if you can contribute to help them fulfilling their needs while they work, that's probably a good thing to do. If you like to do business, you will need to like to work with people, and when you understand their needs and you can contribute to it, well, probably then it's the right thing to do. If it's not against, yeah, I like it, low dignity and performance, but do not promise them the result. The result is theirs, and employees should understand that companies have needs as well. By the way,
yeah,
organizations have
that's
as well.
very well said. There is this very interesting American sociologist, Richard Sennett. He's written this beautiful book about a craftsman. And his definition of craftsmanship, I like it a lot, is the desire to do a job well for its own sake. But beautifully said, beautifully said. And there is something of self-realization there. And that is, and so if you create as a company an environment where people can do good, dignified jobs and realize themselves, you're probably going to get good company results as well.
Yeah, you know, when I was finishing my master long ago, my master studies at the University of Brussels, one of our professors asked us, "Okay, what's your professional ambition? What would you like to do?" And my answer then was, "I'd like to have a job that I wouldn't need to do to earn money. I'd like to be free and do it for other reasons than earning money. But in a way, I came to realize in my professional journey that it wasn't completely right, because sometimes if I wasn't there for the money, I would have closed the door. I would have quitted suddenly, and that would have been the wrong decision. So, not having that freedom of quitting a job instantly sometimes helps me to overcome some difficulties and not to shy away from the
I
difficulties. So,
fully agree. Fully. If utter freedom, utter
yeah,
freedom, apart from the fact it's a little theoretical, utter freedom does not always help you to stand challenges and to deal with disappointment. I
exactly.
agree. I agree. There is this. My mom delivered 5 sons, and my mom, I'm number 4, and my mom used to say in Dutch, het is een zalige moeder. The
Zalige moed.
blessed, een zalige moeder.
Yeah.
The blessed having to do things. So get out here, Batson, because, and I like that a lot, that idea. It's the,
Le devoir sacré, probably
yeah,
in French. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool.
So
Cool.
I agree there. I agree.
Yeah. Have you had in your careers more difficult moments that could have been failures or big mistakes that taught you something?
Yeah, I was in a few jobs. There's a few things to share here with you, Frederic. There were a few jobs that I found horrible, but that taught me good lessons. My penultimate job at Unilever, I was in the committee, in the team who were to run a corporate center review, uh, ordinated by the then 2 CEOs of Unilever. And it was terrible. No one wanted it. The 2 CEOs didn't want it either, and it was a hopeless project. What it I was fortunate to work for a boss, the leader of that team, who became a very good friend of mine and who taught me many lessons. But the essential lesson I learned for myself. So I realized I had failed. I had really failed to contract deliverables of my job and contract the support I needed to do that. And but that insight only landed many years after. I felt unenergized. I felt worn down, and it was terrible. But and only in hindsight, I realized this. I could have done this much better if I would have managed to contract my deliverables and to contract the support I needed. That's yeah.
Contract, you mean by making expectations clearer from the start of the project? Is it what I should understand there?
So I am going to deliver this, but I need that and that from you. And here's Frederic, you will have seen that as well. Look at job descriptions. Look at often target setting in the performance management cycle. It's so broad, so unspecific. It is very difficult to afterwards decide whether anything has been delivered, because almost deliberately the wording has been kept vague. And the other thing I've learned here is very often in the boardroom, in the C-suite, the key players are not in total agreement about what needs to be prioritized. And here's what I've seen. They then do. They keep the commitments and the agreements a little vague, leave the mess to their direct reports, and here's what they call it. They call it empowerment. And it's lack of contracting.
Wow.
That's the lesson I've learned, really.
So they delegate their disagreements and they call it
Precisely.
empowerment.
Well
Yeah.
said.
And then do they say that people are not tolerant to ambiguity?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've seen this. I've
Yeah.
seen this.
Yeah.
And I've probably practiced it myself, to be
Yeah.
honest.
So far.
sometimes
Yes,
do
yes.
not realize. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this is an interesting lesson I've learned. Yeah.
Yeah. Part of the contracting, I've learned, I've heard you say several times that HR directors, CHROs, HR leaders need air cover.
Yeah.
What do you mean there?
Well, I've seen colleagues who were a little underwhelming in their performance. And when I then started thinking and started analyzing, it became clear that the CEO was not all that ambitious and was happy for them to just look after the shop. And so what I've seen is if as a HR lead you wish to bring about meaningful change, a meaningful change as expressed in better company performance, it's like making an omelette for which you have to break eggs, Frederick. And if the CEO wants you to make an omelette and doesn't want you to break eggs, you're setting yourself up for failure. So if the CEO does not go out and actively support and give you the support you need when things get contentious, you won't get much done.
It's the risk of double binds, right? Double injunctions. Do this
Yeah,
and this at the same time, which are not compatible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 indeed, indeed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true that HR is often exposed to things where if you do not have your CEO covering you, then you would end up in the wall, right?
yeah. And the other side of this equation is, and I'm simplifying this a little to convey the thought. Most people do not join HR from hatred of people. Right? So we often join HR because we like people and want people to be happy, and that is not always helpful when you arrive in the C-suite. So I'm not recommending a cynical approach, but when you get to senior levels, you have to make trade-offs. You have to balance interests, and if you want people to be happy, you do not always manage to make those trade-offs. That,
Mm.
that's what I've learned as well.
Should you then be ready to be unpopular?
Yeah, that's the. I just read this interesting book. It's two Japanese authors, and the title escapes you now. It's something with being unafraid to be hated, something like that. And it turns out to be a good explanation of the Adlerian psychology. Konrad Adler, the contemporary of Freud and Jung, and it's all about distinguishing between what sits in your bucket, what are you responsible. The courage to be disliked. That's the book. The book is called The Courage to be Disliked, and it's written as a dialogue, Frederick. It's a beautiful book. It's so well written. It's a dialogue between a master and an apprentice,
All
and it's
right.
all about being much better aware of where does your responsibility reside and where does the responsibility of other people reside. Very, very nice. Yeah.
I wish I knew this earlier in my career. I've made so many mistakes by trying to please people, by trying to be kind and to do something because I was known for my empathy and so understanding people so well that I would find solutions for people. But sometimes, yeah, I was probably lacking the courage to be disliked. Yeah, very.
Yes. 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 Yeah. My experience is totally similar to yours. Yeah.
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 I like to talk about culture in organization. We talk a lot about culture. What's your view on culture?
Yeah, Frederic. You know Edgar Schein, the American author, who died a few years ago at age 98. He's he's one of the very few, in my view, that has written meaningfully about culture and made clear how pervasive a thing it is. And that has made me clear that we talked about culture in mm, too much in a far too generic way. Like where we would come in and in a company and say we have to change the culture. Frederic, that's madness. You don't. So Peter Drucker, famous Peter Drucker, said it 60 years ago. It's taken me decades to realize how right he was. He said culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Everyone
And
says that, meanwhile. Yeah.
yes, and we don't realize what we're saying. So at least I did not realize what I was saying. And the point is, it is so pervasive, so all-encompassing. If you don't make it smaller and if you don't select, you won't get anything done. And what I've come to realize about this big thing called culture, there is much in the legacy of a company, much in the common behaviors in a company that you should want to sustain and continue because it has brought you the successes that you have achieved. And so everything you say about culture, as I think I've learned, is it starts with being with effusively praising what's good in the company, what goes well, and becoming surgically precise about a few things you wish to change. And I can only mention one achievement that in all my over 40 years, only one time I think I got that right. When we were at ING Bank, the CEO came with a truly new strategy, and then we started talking values, and I made him understand that values again is too vague a principle. There's too long a path from a value to behavior. So we agreed in the end that we should talk to each other and talk to the company about behaviors. And then, Frederick, we conducted a very nice exercise, which was very effective, partly by design, partly by good luck. And in line with the egalitarian Dutch culture at ING Bank, we set up a good and smart process by which, over a few months, we invited people in forum discussions and with questionnaires to come up with their thinking about what went well at ING and what, in view of the strategy, could be done better. And we arrived at a behavioral code, and we worked very well with marketing and communications people for good wording. Essentially, that orange code, as it was called, because the color of ING is orange, that was a beautiful balance between what had always gone very well in the bank and which we would like to continue, and a few things we should change. And then that orange code, a one pager with a few descriptions to explain, landed explosively well, but beyond my expectation. And it's the orange code became a language in which we would say, well, hey, sorry, this is not orange code behavior. Or, sorry, you're doing something so very much beautiful. And I felt that it was so successful because of the way we put it together, but also because it found a very nice balance between what are we doing well that we do not want to get rid of and what should we really do better. And by approaching it like that, we made it very specific, we made it appreciative, and it's so the lesson I learned is that's probably the best possible way to look at this big thing called culture.
This is very insightful, and I see a few connections. Appreciative inquiry, that's
Yes.
application of appreciative inquiry, starting with what goes well, and a strengths-based approach that we like to more and more. I see it more and more in companies that HR, for the individual development of people, try to do that, identify the strengths and build on the strengths. And it's true that, yeah, it should be the same for a company, starting from what's strong in its identity and build from there. And that reminds me, in one of the previous podcasts, I had Denis Machuel, who is the group CEO of the Adecco Group. Brilliant leader, incredible leader.
Ah,
And we had that conversation. My traditional thinking is business designs a strategy, and then HR looks at the organization. Do we need to modify the org chart and the way we organize ourselves and the governance? And then the culture. What should change in the culture? And then he corrected that a little bit, and he said, well, perhaps you should start with the culture. Who are we? And then what should your strategy be? And not
interesting.
who we are to what we would like to do. And yeah, it stayed with me. Like perhaps we need to start with
Absolutely.
culture, and that's very much in connection with what you've
Yes.
explained.
So what that is. worded very concisely. I like that. I like that a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Starting
cool.
about who you are, what are you able to deliver, and what will
Yeah,
you not be able to deliver because of who you
yeah.
are.
So build a strategy for who you are, and not try to be who you are not to deliver on a strategy that you've dreamt of.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
find that very meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. And another quote I recently came across on LinkedIn was HR often gets blamed for the culture CEO has created. Uh, and so we are there in the middle trying to say yes, no, but, and so
Yeah,
yeah,
that
deep. So
is interesting.
like this being very precise, you said a surgical precision on okay, what is it, and not too
Yeah.
broad.
And the other thing is, Frederick, very often the majority of the people that have arrived in the C-suite have made their careers in the company. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a self-perpetuating cycle. Like so that makes, because you might say the leaders in the company, the top management of the company should be better able than anyone else to change the culture. But here's the point: they come from that culture, and so that is very difficult. And if I just bring in this evidence that I read here and there, we talk about much forms of diversity. We do not often talk about tenure diversity in the top. So, and what I mean by that is, how many people in the top of the company do you have that joined the company recently? And there's a point being made that the true nimbleness of the organization, so the ability of the company to change, you might say agility if you want, is driven by tenure diversity in the top. So if you
You mean
bring in
by
fresh,
refreshing, by renewal?
and I 2 times I joined a company as a chief HR officer, coming in from outside. Frederic, I had totally underestimated the difficulty of joining a company at such a senior level.
What
Because
was difficult?
difficult is first to grasp how things are getting done. Second, to to stay away from the sort of alienation between yourself and the company. The company is groups of people, companies, systems, if you want, are much more averse of change than you think. And so, wanting to make meaningful change coming from outside is not very easy, as I've experienced. So I was unprepared because it hadn't landed with me that it would be difficult. But we're touching on something of the continuity and the pervasiveness of culture that we totally underestimate. And whenever I hear people saying, leaders saying, we're going to change the culture, I have to smile because I often think you don't know what you're saying. And so the Adecco leader you just mentioned, I like the thinking. Why don't we start with describing precisely who we are, what we're good at? Because if we want to be distinctive in the markets where we operate, it should sit there. Uh, Otherwise, we'll be a long way.
I don't know if it has been studied how many strategies failed for that reason, for the fact that they were not fit for the identity of the company.
I like the thinking. I like the thought.
Yeah.
And the other thought what I would add, Frederic, is I have seen by now very many examples of strategies, transformation, which is an eroded and overused word, derailing because companies take on far too much. It goes
Yeah.
much beyond the capacity of ordinary people to absorb change. Now, we totally overlook that and underestimate the inability of big systems to adjust themselves.
And at the same time, isn't it the quest of leadership is to do extraordinary things with ordinary people? Yeah.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, very well
Uh,
said. I like that. It's just, yeah, doing extraordinary things with ordinary people.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
very
because
nice.
we are all ordinary. Indeed.
We're
Yeah.
all fallible human beings. Yeah.
Don't forget that we have so much in common with most of the. When we look at our DNA, I think I don't know 90% common with most of the species on Earth. So yeah, the flies and all animals. There's this one thing on the culture that I like to come back to, which is the culture change program. So would you say that it's set for failure? It's
Yeah,
you would
I would say that.
you
Yeah.
wouldn't do that? Yeah. Okay. Nice.
I had a very good conversation with a client who our company that are they were government owned, and they will IPO themselves in due time, and they've got these very talented and highly energetic people in the top, and what they see is one of the many issues they had identified was a long-term absence, long-term absenteeism among employees was much bigger than in comparable companies. And they came with a big health and well-being project, and we had a long conversation. And my point to them was, you're making this much too big. You should do much better case management, because most of the people that are absent for a long time are so not because of any work-related issue, but because of private issues. And in the Netherlands, which is where the company sits, the laws around absenteeism are extremely generous for employees. And so my point to them was, you're making something very big of a prevention program that you don't know ever will land. You should become much more specific about the problem you're addressing, which is far too high long-term absenteeism, and that you. So I won't bother you with details, but the point is, and I made that mistake often in my career. It is sexy and attractive to launch big programs with laudable intentions. That often, for the most part, don't do anything to solve the problem you're faced with, and that holds for culture as well. I would say, two
There's a
big
bit of
words.
a tendency to if it were an iceberg, to treat what's visible, to treat the symptom, and not to deep dive for the root causes that might lie outside of the company, right? Or
Yeah,
outside what you can
yeah,
do. Yeah.
you're right, Frederic. On the other hand, I would say, when CEOs I work with say to me in a conversation, you should look at this holistically, I always half jokingly say, don't do that. Don't look at it holistically, because you won't get done anything. Uh,
Tell me more. What's behind?
yeah, the point is, everyone understands that things hang together. We totally understand that. Hardly anything appears in isolation. We get that. But you are under time constraints. You want to solve problems because you want to drive your company performance in a short time horizon. And so it's taking on everything, going for the deepest roots. It sounds good, but it takes ages. And so there are better ways to solve the particular problem you have than take on everything. And so this touches on another idea, Frederic. And we wish everything to be all right. We wish everything to be well organized, and so but that's a big ambition. In view of who we are as a particular company, in view of what we're good at and what we're not good at, I've learned over the years we should blissfully live with what we're not good at and accept the consequences. It's like well, I for many years worked with this McKinsey tool called the Organizational Health Inventory, a well thought through tool. I would never work with it again, and here's why. It's whenever you conduct a survey, there's always somewhere a part of the company where something is not good enough. And what we used to do, Frederic, is launch a project and launch a project there and launch a project there. And all that energy will probably not solve that problem because most possibly the problem follows from who we are as a company. And all that energy can only be spent once. All that energy you cannot spend and invest in becoming really excellent in a few things you're already good at. So I think what I've learned over my career, and this has taken me much time, Frederic, is there really is only so much that matters for company performance. And we take on far more than what matters for company performance. So we are evaporating a lot of energy that you could use in a much wiser way.
Yeah, I've done a lot in terms of employee survey, engagement survey, satisfaction survey. I practice as well the OHI, Organizational Health Index. I wouldn't throw everything, but I've come to realize that it tends to give you lagging indicators, things that people say because it's what happens, and with a lot of biases. And I dream of a world where HR dream of a well I dream of a situation where HR, let's be more modest. I dream of a situation where HR could work with leading indicators, saying, okay, what do we have now and what will happen if we don't act on it? And it's probably not declarative. And recently I met the first for the first time I met a data scientist entirely focused on HR. And so I'll work with her. So she's working with one of our partners, and I think it should open a way to say, okay, how do we not act out of the traditional HR indicators? Like if you take turnover, it's not uninteresting, but people are gone already.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's a bit
And
late. It's a bit late. And so what would be leading indicators that could put HR in a position to say, here is what will happen unless we do this or this now?
yeah, I like that. And
And so the world of data, that's great. Yeah.
yeah, I've got a recommendation, which is in what I have learned. I'm pretty clear in my mind, your number one most important leading indicator of company performance is the skills and competencies of your managers.
Yeah.
And 75 to 80%, Frederic, in every company reports to your frontline managers. Um, they are very often hardly any more sophisticated than the people they lead. And we've been talking a lot about what we call leadership, a conveniently vague concept, and just overlooked how important it is to equip those managers with with the basic skills, and hence with the confidence to operate. What I once built a leadership program, which we called a leadership program because everyone is in love with the word leadership, which was essentially at various levels equipping our managers at various levels with the basic skills and competencies they would need to deliver the strategy of the bank, as it was. And that is the first time in my career that this program produced significantly better results in the OHI. And it was a lesson. I intuitively, I felt we were on the right track, but the results were astonishing, Frederic.
So can you tell us more? So what was it?
So we identified with senior management in the bank what we needed to deliver in the strategy and what that would take from managers at various levels. And then we went out and to talk to various vendors. I also learned a lesson that every vendor wants you to think they can solve every of your problems, and they cannot. And so we build a highly practical and good-looking program because you have to enthuse people. You have to make it a little sexy. I'm totally okay. But what we did, we just built the skills of managers to deal with prioritizing, to deal with improving performance of people. So changing the performance management practice from a backward-looking practice into a forward-looking practice. And Frederic, I don't think I will ever again be a chief HR officer, but if I would, I think I would invest 80% or even more of my training budget in this one thing, which is building the skills and competencies, and hence the self-confidence of managers, because that's where engagement happens. That is where culture happens. People run away, join for the company's reputation, and they leave for the manager. And I'm super fine.
There's a book by Gallup which is called "It's the Manager." A brilliant book. I think
It's
it's a
a
must
brilliant
read.
book.
Yeah,
And in that same school, there is this book, Marcus Buckingham, Nine Lies About Work, and there's the really good book of Ashley Goodall, who was a co-writer with Marcus Buckingham on the 9 Lies About HR. And that book of Ashley Goodall is called The Problem with Change. And Gallup have unearthed a line of thinking that I find really very promising.
yeah. And I think Gallup says that 70% of employee engagement variation is explained by the quality of the manager. And at the same time, there's another statistic, which is 82% of manager has been selected based on their technical skills because they were good at a job. We asked them to do more and then to have people, but it's not because they were good at managing teams. And so I like what you say, bring back focus on the managers and equip them. And at the same time, I think we do too much. It's a bit paradoxical. We do too little, and at the same time, we do too much. Today, we see that the young generations do not see being a manager as a promotion, as an advancement. I think they see it as a very difficult job where you all in a sudden become responsible for a number of things that you're not prepared for, which is keep your expertise, that's generally okay, but then becoming responsible for other people, their performance, their career, sometimes becoming their psychologist when something goes wrong at work or outside of work, being available to them, being able to being a storyteller now. So and each time there's a new idea from HR, it falls on the manager. Say, oh, manager should also do this and this and this now. And so how can you humanly do that?
Yeah,
And we see organizations that have separated the role of manager into different people. More and more, we see companies who say, no, manager is not responsible for the career. We have career coaches for that because it's just too much. You ask a manager to do too many things at the same time, it's not doable.
Yeah, but that's a good point. This is Bob Sutton, Robert Sutton, the Stanford professor, has written his good book called The Friction Project. And what he says is the top of the company should be the guardians of the time of their people, because their people should work for the customer. In actual fact, he says, we are the robbers of that time with all our pet project, everything we think is important. And we are just forcing the manager to not focus on primary performance of their teams. And I found that very meaningful, very meaningful.
You and I already talked earlier about organizational entropy. You remember?
Yes.
And that's
You
really this
talk to me about
notion.
it. You talk to me about it.
But then you showed me the theoretical reference,
Yeah.
and 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 it's really for those who do not know that it comes from physics. The world has a tendency to disorganize and tends to be in expansion of more and more, and so organizations follow the same rule. And HR should fight against organizational entropy and say, hey, can we stay lean and focused and not do more and more and more? Because the traditional question is, okay, what do we stop doing each time we add something? And often we do not stop in the same proportion, so we add. And while HR should fight against entropy, keep things simple, deconstruct bureaucracy, there's a tendency to add entropy in organizations.
Yes.
And I plead guilty. I've done it myself, coming with new ideas, but adding isn't always the solution. It's
Yeah,
how
but
do we
yeah,
simplify? How do we come to the core of what's really important?
yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, yeah. How to teach yourself to subtract to reduce, to take out. Very, very difficult because, Frederick, people at senior levels in companies, they often arrive there for two reasons, in a slightly simplified way of putting it. First is their clock speed is faster, so they can handle more. And the second is greater energy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done all the work to get there. Now, that is a very useful combination of characteristics for being at that level, in view of the complexity and the amount of work. It's also a total killer, Frederick, because in that combination of fast clock speed and great energy, very often a bit of adrenaline addiction comes in, and you want to march. You want to march, and you think that by taking on more stuff, you're useful. So often I meet chief HR officers or CEOs who would start a conversation saying, "We've done so much. We are taking on so much." But Frederick, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. If it doesn't serve abiding by laws and regulations, if it doesn't serve guaranteeing dignity of people at work, and if it doesn't serve company performance, then don't do it. That's the
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard,
yes,
but it's true. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
really very interesting compass that you always come back to these three things. It gets a sense of focus and compass and questioning. It's a good way to question. Um, can we talk about talent to value? Your work in talent to value. What is it?
So there's only so much needed for company performance, and there's only so much needed for increasing your performance by becoming ever more relevant for your customers and for your investors. And in talent to value, what we do is we work with the CEOs, with the CEO and the people lead and the finance lead, to boil down their strategy to the few spots, as we would call it, in the company where invariably 75-80% of the value creation sits. So not everything you take on increases your relevance for customers. Not everything you take on drives that value. And what we do with CEOs is we help them to reduce their strategy to the few spots that really matter and identify in each of those spots the few priorities that really create the value. And then, by the way, CEOs don't find that difficult in general.
Oh,
And then we
okay.
relate that to a few roles, often lower down in the company, that, can I say, do the heavy lifting of the value creation. So in that process, we help the CEO to identify 10 or 15 or 20 roles at various spots in the company that, if they are serious about increasing the relevance of the company, are roles they should own and they should have a line of sight with. And in the same spirit, we identify in those roles the 3 or 4 deliverables over the next 2 years and the 3 or 4 risks that need to be mitigated in order to set up the talent for delivery in that role. So it's in a way applying the rigor and the precision we use in investment decisions, applying those to people decisions.
So you apply a Pareto principle to talent, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
In how would you say it's wrong from HR to believe that everyone has talent? We hear it often in HR, like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
talent is everywhere, everyone has talent. Would
yeah,
you say it's wrong?
yeah. And let's just see how we can redefine this, Frederick. I would say by now, a talent is only a talent in connection to the role they have. So I might become, if I work hard, a talent in long distance running, but look at my build. Will I become a weightlifter? No. So am I talented? Well, I might become talented as a long distance runner. I'm certainly not a talent in weightlifting. And what we do in the way we practice talent management, and you and I have seen great examples of superb talent management, we over-index on the supply side, which is the person, and we under-index on the demand side. It's a talent is a talent in relation to the challenge and the demand of the role. So is everyone talented? Well, yeah, well, they may be in some respects, and they certainly are not in many other respects.
Thank you. That's one more insight. So focus on the demand,
Yeah,
while HR tends to focus on the supply. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Very,
yeah.
very, very insightful. What are you looking at when you look yourself at people and at talent? What are the characteristics that you believe should be looked at?
Yeah, I have come to see, Frederick, it really is horses for courses. So if I made a few mistakes over my career in selecting people that turned out not to be the right candidate for that role. And the pattern was not so much that I was a bad reader of people. The pattern in my mistakes was total lack of clarity about the demands of the role.
Again,
Total.
same. Yeah,
And often key players around the role do not entirely agree about what needs to be delivered in the role. And so up goes the number of pages of the job description. And it gets vaguer and vaguer and vaguer. And job descriptions very often are documents on which you can select everyone or reject everyone. And so I've come to see that if I look at people for a role, I have to really religiously base myself on the role description. And here's the other thing, Frederick, as we know by now from how neuroscience has developed, um, um, I meet you for the first time, and within 60 seconds, I have either a liking or a dislike. And in the rest of the conversation, I sort of intuitively build up confirmatory evidence for this initial liking.
yeah, yeah.
And that's a good thing because that's how society functions. And so there is a reason why this has developed in this way. But it does hinder me greatly in establishing an assessment of whether you're good for that role. So, in a half funny way of saying, of all means we have to select people for a role, the by far worst instrument is a selection interview because 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 our brains play games with us, Frederick.
Mhm. Here's a little anecdote. So when I was younger in my career, it's over 25 years ago, the company wanted to professionalize recruitment. It was a big pharma, and they wanted to professionalize recruitment. And so we had a workshop, a 3-day workshop to learn new ways to come to more objectivity and not rely on intuition only and to have proper definition of success, blah, 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 everything. And they managed to invite the CEO of that company for a keynote one evening. And apparently it wasn't properly briefed. And he said, "Oh, HR people, well, let me tell you one thing. In the first 60 seconds, I immediately know if people will succeed or not in this company." Destroying everything. Just in one sentence, he was deconstructing everything that was there. Yeah. In a way, Hein, again, understanding and having the conversation up front, it's back to what you said earlier in this podcast, that at boards, people do not go to the end of their disagreements and then they empower other people and they blame them and then probably they'll find them not accountable. And probably the same with recruitment and selection. It's the lack of proper alignment up front that could generate either inefficiencies in the recruitment process, in the sense that it's then when we see candidates that we start aligning on our needs, or worse, once people have started and we discover why it doesn't work, it's on things that we could have explicitly said before. Um, Too often, too often. Um, yeah. Um, I've seen this in a company where someone had a role uh, in between different departments, and so when that person was going to speak to the R&D, they said your role is such and such and such, But then when that person was going to speak to the salespeople, they say, "Oh no, your role is such and such and such." And so she was there in the middle, lost her job at the end, and the people around were honest enough to say, "Hey, it was not related solely. Let's not blame that person. Let's
Good point. Very good point.
yeah." And they
2 out
said,
of 3
"Let's write an
cases.
agreement." So that they learned from it. They said, "Okay, it's probably too late because it generated too many conflicts around the person." So they took their responsibility. But at the end, they said, well, for the replacement. And so they made a written agreement and they gave it a name. And they said, here is our agreement, our mutual agreement on what we expect of that thing, because delegating our disagreement to the new incumbent is completely unfair, unrealistic, and won't work.
Wisdom. I find this wisdom. That's what I see in my work with a company now. We totally underestimate the flaws in the role design. And when you're not set up, when you don't have decision rights, when there's no alignment with the among the key players, and in a matrixed organization, Frederic, hardly anyone has full decision rights. So everyone can say no, no one can say yes. And then if you don't have the team and the capacity to deliver, you're setting up someone for failure. Yeah, I fully,
Yeah.
fully.
And then the disaster is that because these people hold the power, it's easy for them to blame others, not to look into their own plate and say, well, it's obviously others, and people do not dare so much to contradict them, and so they repeat the same mistake. So honesty is very important. Uh, you've been around for many years. What has changed in HR? What has changed in leadership?
I remember how I started my career 41 years ago, back in 1984, as as it was called, a sector personnel officer in a sausage factory of Unilever in the south of the
Oh,
country.
that's very sexy.
Yeah.
Sausage factory.
Yeah. And I was the sector personnel officer for for that department in the factory where the Hema rookworst was being produced, and it was a great article. At that time, HR was entirely administrative. We were servants. And we were not always very well qualified. By now, when I meet chief HR officers, when I meet senior HR people, they've got the ear of the business and they've got a profession. So I would say there's the gravitas of the function has enormously improved. Yeah, much better than ever before. So we made quite some strides, I would say. On leadership, I am a little bit more hesitant, Frederic, because in my own thinking, I've come to see that leadership is not anything in itself. It is a means to an end. And someone can be a great leader I worked for a CEO in telecom who was a brilliant CEO. I learned a lot from him for the challenges the company was faced with at that time. He would never have been a guy to grow the business because that was just not his set of skills and competencies. So, and what I do not always like in reading about leadership is there is often lack of precision in our thinking, Frederic. We romanticize about leaders. Great leaders do this and do that. This man is a great leader. Well, that might be the case, but how come? And in view of what sort of circumstances does this person have is seen as a great leader? Ian Kershaw is an Irish professor at Cambridge, I think. He has written a beautiful book called Personality and Power, where he describes for the 20th century 15 people, I think, who made or broke Europe. And in every of these stories, he is after identifying the impact they had and the legacy they left. And continuously he says, I'm trying to find out what was brought by the environment, what was brought by the person. You will like to read it. And it drove home my thinking about it depends. It depends whether you're a good leader or not. So
With,
sorry for
with,
the long answer.
yeah, well, with all the references that you've given, I think I have my reading list for the next year. Uh, and what has changed in the workforce? What has changed in people's expectation? Do you see changes, or is it stable?
I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical. We talk about generations. I am not so sure. I rather talk in terms of life stages. A kid of 25 who has no responsibilities, doesn't have a partner, that hasn't bought a house, hasn't got children, has a different perspective on reality than the same kid 10 years later who has a partner, who is married, has got a house, has got children. I think when we talk about expectations of people, I'm afraid we focus on that highly privileged small part of the labor market that gone to university and etc. etc. And we just blissfully forget about the millions of people who go out for a job every day, who have to pay their bills, and I'm being very respectful of that big group of people. And I am not entirely sure how much has changed in general, Frederic. I'm just not sure. I can't say nothing has changed, but I found the evidence we come up with, even for laudable and venerable magazines like Harvard Business Review, we often forget we're only talking about such a small part of the entire population. So I'm not saying this, Frederic, from cynicism, because I'm not, but we have to be a bit more realistic, I think, in talking about leadership and expectations of people.
Hein, that goes to a thought that I had. So I've always worked in very sophisticated environment with very sophisticated. I was lucky because I love that engineers, PhDs, highly educated people, etc. And so I've forged a certain opinion or vision of people at work or people in general based on those whom I've met every day. And two of my very good friends have a totally different professional profile. One of them is a vet, and the other is an undertaker. And both have in common that they have customers in a very broad sense, and so they cover very different profiles. They have the richest people, the poorest people, the most educated, the less educated. And their view on humans is often very different than mine. And so that questions me.
I get a very, very interesting, very interesting.
Hein, what would be your advice to the people who listen, who most of them are in the HR profession?
So here's my advice. Take the perspective of company performance and ask yourself what you can do to drive it. And ask yourself, what are you now undertaking that does not drive company performance? That would be my advice. But it's about company performance. That's
Clear, consistent, no surprise.
Yeah.
If you could meet the Hein back in the time, the beginning of your career, what would be a good advice that you would give to that young professional?
I would say be less enthused by solutions that are in search of a problem. That's what I would say to the young Hein.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hein. Thank you so much.
That was a great conversation, Freddy. Thanks a lot for your time. We'll be in touch, but thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
It was really a delight to have this call.
Well, me too. I didn't see the time flowing, and it's
Yeah,
good
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
we put it in. We could have continued. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and share it with others around you.